You are watching Conscious Evolution with Wes Heffernan.
The conversation is dualistic in nature, and so through this conversation we were having, it got to a point where we're discussing, what would the structure look like that would support these concepts and ideas that most of this generation has, right? About, we need homelessness. Why does that exist? Hunger. Why does that exist? Why doesn't everyone have medical care? Access to medicine and so forth. And there's a lot more to that. But the structure we currently have won't support much more than what we currently are experiencing. And again, so we need a new structure, right? Something grander. And it's still going to be a boundary. There's still going to be, even if we tear this one down that we live in, there's still going to be a boundary, a structure that we have to support our experience as a human being. And so we were talking about what would that look like, and can't really. And so instead of trying to tell him things, right, I've switched gears to leading him with questions, and I do that more often now. I've done it quite often with other people, but it's a little harder when it's your own flesh and blood, right? So we spent about an hour with me kind of probing, and I never could, and we were just dancing around this concept that I wanted him to get, but I didn't want to, I wanted him to get it, right? I didn't want to provide it.
Right.
And so we get to this point in the conversation where, so what's important? And one of the things he said was living in balance with nature. I said, great, right? Because that encompasses almost everything that I want to bring to life, not only here, but with you, with the world, with anybody that's watching any of this, right? Living in harmony with nature. What does that mean? And so he goes on for about 5 minutes and explains what that means to him, right? And so it clicked while I was listening to that, and to be honest, to be thinking and listening is kind of hard, so I probably missed parts of what he was saying, but overall he gave a pretty good dialogue of what an individual person would think living in harmony with nature would look like. But what would nature say, right? Well, if you ask nature, what would humanity living in harmony with you look like? Do you think the answers would be the same? Different perspectives, right?
Right.
And so this is the idea of inner and outer, right? Here's an individual looking back at what they perceive and experience and what information and knowledge they have about nature and coming up with a concept, idea, belief of what living in harmony with nature would look like. But now, why don't you, and you're going to make this up, son.
But harmony
right?
means agreement,
agreement,
it
right?
wouldn't be.
And
the fish would be like, don't eat me. The trees would be like, don't cut me down.
But
right?
not even just that. I've watched documentaries and things, but even what we've done with migratory patterns of birds or fish, or with the sounds of the submarines, there's so much, right? But you can't even begin to scratch the surface of it if you're looking at it from here, right? And so one of the things I made clear to him was it's going to feel a little strange because you're making this up. You're having an imaginary conversation, but have an imaginary conversation with nature, and that's your internal dialogue, right? And for whatever reason, I've been able to change the channel, so to speak, of my internal dialogue to the point that if I want to have a conversation with nature, boom, let me turn to that channel. If I want to have a conversation with Jesus, let me, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can plug in any idea you want to, and then you can turn it and have a conversation. Now, are you ever going to be nature in full? Are you ever going to be any of these concepts in full? No, you're not. But if you hone that skill, and if you have a relationship worthy of this level of understanding, again, a level, right? But if you've allowed the dialogue and the relationship to expand who you are, right? It's fascinating, the conversations you can have. And that was one of the things my grandfather always used to ask, where do you come up with this ideas or this information? I was like, I mean, from the air, mostly from the internal dialogue. They're just there, and it's through talking with myself, going down this linear path, right? But then circling back. So straight lines and circles, straight lines and circles.
But you mentioned earlier you read a lot. You don't seem like the person who will watch a bunch of TV. It seems like you're more of a person who will study, learn, expand your mind. Were you like that as a kid? For your grandfather to ask, where do you get this? Were you always like
I was very
using your,
And I used to take things apart and not be able to put them back together. You know, I love taking things apart. I loved a chemistry set, mixing things together. So, sorry, poor ants. But I used to always make ant killer. That was my thing. I was making ant killer. So I'd be, man, and this was like, you know, early 80s, so there was a lot of safety things that weren't in place, but, you know, I'm in there mixing like sulfuric acid. There's no telling what all I made. But I've always been very, very inquisitive. But I think it boils back to being told, by everybody, you know, how special I was for whatever reason, but to fold that in with I can be anything I want to be, I can do anything I want to do, and that opens a lot of doors, right? Especially for a young person who still has their imagination and still has that flame or that spark of creativity within them. Like,
then to hear people always tell you you're special, different people at different times.
And so it's always been take in information and contemplate it, like study it, figure it out. What does it mean? What's deeper? It's never been about the surface level. I've always gone underneath the surface as far back as I can possibly remember. So I have to assume it's just a part of who I am, right? It's
just how you're wired.
Just how I'm wired, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and that kind of sort of keys into another huge concept within the story, is that this is my story, right? Your story is going to be different. Your story is going to be different. We're going to have the same type of archetypical characters. We're going to have the same type of general experiences, but you know, the stage you're on, the stage I'm on, the stage that any of you all are on, like, you're going to have your own story. And until you start telling it, until you start living it, it's not your story. You're living someone else's. And so, you know, the concept of the awakening, or has so many of these New Age concepts or words that honestly are probably doing more harm than good to this movement. Sometimes they're getting hijacked, sometimes they're just completely misunderstood, but the idea of the awakening that everybody's talking about us going through is quite literally that. You're beginning to understand that I don't have to live this story. This is somebody else's story, and I'm playing a character, a role in it. And at some point during the journey, if you do decide to take it, you realize that I have my own story. Right? It may be an inset inside this grander story that we all still have to take to the end, right? But, you know, Marvel Universe, Star Wars, both of these give grand examples of how they have gone in and pulled out a particular character and made a whole nother series about it, right? And you can go in and pull out this character and make a whole nother series about that one. Well, life is similar to that in that, you know, we're all living the story of Star Wars because that's the story that's being told. But it doesn't mean that we can't have our own story that may even be in, you know, opposite. It may not agree with what's being told. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to at all, right?
And everybody's in a different season of their life, too.
That's right. That's right. And not just a different season, and a different, again, octave of, like, some of us are seeds just beginning to crack. Some of us are living a life where we've already gone through all that, and, you know, we're beginning to bear fruit. And so
makes me think of the picture of the Amazon in the garage, like when it first started off. It's like, don't compare that Amazon to the Amazon of today, because he was just starting.
Right, exactly. It's an evolution, right? It's a process. And I think that process, at least for the chapter that we're going into, what I'm trying to attempt to do with that is show that there's a structure to that process. And it's a very simple structure, and it's a very simple process. But very quickly it expands into something that, I mean, like you think Big Bang, right? Like it goes from nothing to extraordinarily, even just as a cloud of dust, it's still extraordinarily complex in the amount of expansion and contraction processes that have occurred. I think I haven't gotten extraordinarily deep into this yet, but one of the things that, so like chemistry, like this structure that we're speaking of, everything should be able to lay over it, or the structure itself should lay over anything and everything, and it makes sense, it fit. And so I've really been looking at chemistry lately, and some of the things, and honestly it's odd how, again, my focus or in purpose and intent has been kind of wrapped around chemistry, and so I might watch a documentary on something that has nothing to do with chemistry, but yet there's information that is like, look at it.
Thanks for watching. Join us next time on Conscious Evolution. Don't forget to subscribe.